Hello again, I am Blunty, and that is the ROG Ally handheld gaming PC that I'm playing Cyberpunk on. And one of the very first things I did in my original, rather extensive review was show you folks how well Cyberpunk actually runs on the Ally. Basically doubling the frame rate that the Steam Deck users can reach at the same kind of fidelity and settings, which also means we can sacrifice a little of that boosted frame rate, pump it up to 1080p, and still get that so-called golden 40 FPS that Steam Deck users have decided is the best sweet spot for performance versus visual pleasantness when you're gaming on a handheld PC, with their inherently limited power on offer there. What I did not do in that original batch of testing for my review was even try to turn on ray tracing. Why would I? That's stupid. It's insane. My assumption was, of course, that if we're already running a balancing act of settings versus resolution versus frame rate, surely ray tracing is a fool's errand. Ray tracing is a pig to run. What kind of idiot would try and turn it on a handheld like this? As you may have guessed by now, yes, that Cyberpunk gameplay you're watching, I have ray tracing turned on. Don't believe me? What are you, new around here? Old Blunty rolls BS free, don't you know? Check this out. I'll show you. See that? Ray tracing. Now, all together now in the comment section. Crikey, Blunty, that's redonks. How did you do that? So yesterday, if you haven't spotted it yet, I put up a video where my original thought process was, hey, I wonder how well the Ally will do Minecraft if we throw a few fancy shaders at it. And I know, I'll use the performance nuking PTGI full-on path tracing ray tracer shader so I can make a joke about frames per minute. And I'll be damned to the fiery hellscape of Florida if it didn't just bloody work on me. So instead of making my extremely clever joke, I just had to sit around being gobsmacked that it worked. As indeed it works in Cyberpunk, and I was even more gobsmacked by that. I wish I'd recorded my face when I turned it on for the first time because, my god, shock face meme-worthy image, I am sure. I could have been famous as a meme for my shock face, but I wasn't recording, so opportunity lost. And in fact, not only is ray tracing turned on, but as you might have seen there when I actually showed you the settings, also toggled on are the ray traced reflections, ray traced local shadows, and ray traced lighting set to medium. And it's only friggin' totally playable, kids. I'm going to give you a bunch of side-by-sides in a minute to show you the kinds of visual benefits and indeed sacrifices we have to make to get here, but first, how? How is this working? The how is actually pretty simple. Inside the Ally is a new APU chip from AMD. They call it the Z1 Extreme, or possibly Z1 Extreme, depending on your regional dialect, within which sits 8 Zen 4 CPU cores on a 4nm process. And now here's the important bit for how all this is actually working. The GPU part is based on architecture AMD call RDNA 3. And each and every RDNA 3 compute unit contains one second-generation ray tracing accelerator each. And the Z1 Extreme GPU in the ROG Ally has 12 CUs, so that's 12 ray accelerator cores. For the purposes of comparison, a little context here, the desktop AMD Radeon RX 7900 XT GPU has 84 of these exact same compute units. But as it turns out, 12 of these ray accelerators is just enough to make ray tracing, even in a game like Cyberpunk, ever so close to genuinely practical. So let's dig in some more here. I've been showing you footage from a camera pointed at the unit, and as you might know, usually in my ROG Ally videos I stick to showing you direct capture of gameplay for the cleanest possible comparison point. And the reason I've done it this way this time is, frankly, the Ally's 7-inch 1080p screen and the pixel density versus viewing distance does a lot of favors for making the settings we're using more pleasant to look at. So here, from here on in, we're swapping over to direct capture now. This is the exact same gameplay you were just watching. In fact, I recorded it on the unit itself using the built-in screen recording function linked to Xbox Game Bar's capture system. I usually use an external capture process hooked up to a dock with HDMI output, but I wanted to see if this works, and yeah, it does work, in case you're curious. But specifically what you're looking at here is 720p gameplay with ray tracing on, as we were talking about. And of course, we're in the unit's maximum power 30-watt turbo mode, which is also the only way this is even practical. I'm also utilizing FSR upscaling in performance mode. So internally, the game is rendering at 50% resolution scale, 360p in other words. Still though, for an upscaled 360p, it looks remarkable, doesn't it? That FSR 2.0 juice isn't quite as magic as DLSS, but it does some damn work, doesn't it? You might have noticed I don't have a frame counter up right now because I wanted this to be clean footage, but if you have an eye for such things, you might suspect we're not exactly holding 30 FPS the entire time. And you'd be dead right. We're close a lot of the time, but there are relatively frequent dips below it. So, while ordinarily I don't like to dip past FSR Performance, this time we're gonna need the Ultra Performance mode, which uses a 3 times scale. So now, internally, we're at 33%, or a mere 240p. 240p. That's like Game Boy Advance resolution. Wait, was the Game Boy Advance 240p? It was close to that, wasn't it? Someone double check me on that. And so, here's our first side-by-side to give you a feel for how that 720p in Ultra Performance FSR mode looks, both with ray tracing on and with the standard raster lighting, and what that does to our relative frame rates. All other settings not specified here are basically the same as the Golden 40 settings I discussed in the original review of the Ally. And I've chosen Jig Streak for the location for these tests, as it's proven to be a nice, reliable test spot. If we can get playable frame rates here, the rest of the game should be fine. And as you can see, while we do dip just below 30 FPS in spots, in large part and mostly we're above 30 FPS. As you can also see, merely turning on ray tracing basically halves our frame rate. It's also worth a reminder that if you see any screen tearing, please know that it is only apparent on these externally recorded bits of footage. The Ally's screen is FreeSync Premium rated, which nukes any screen tearing extremely effectively on the display of the device itself. Now, some of the difference in this particular walk path for my tests here between ray tracing and raster can be subtle, and I know some people have left comments on other videos I made about ray tracing in this and various other games that they can't see the difference, which frankly is nuts to me. I don't want to gaslight you here, but I don't know how you don't see it. So just for reference here, just so we're all on the same page, can I show you some simple side-by-sides of on and off ray tracing in screenshot form so you can see it a little more clearly? Now, I don't know about you, but I see the difference, and I really appreciate the extra immersion that ray tracing delivers for us, or at least the lack of extra visual distractions. When presented with more realistic shadowing, more realistic lighting, more realistic color bounce, reflections and shadows especially, the old school lighting techniques, beyond not looking as realistic, sometimes have weird artifacts that are distracting and sort of, can tank your immersion a little bit. So personally speaking, I would much rather have ray tracing, especially in games with this kind of visual style. I mean, sure, the game is hardly impossible to enjoy without ray tracing, but I do honestly believe it's a better experience with it on. Maybe not on the ROG Ally though, considering the other sacrifices we're making to get ray tracing to work, but I recently did a full live streamed playthrough with the new overdrive ray tracing mode on my big rig gaming PC with a 3080 Ti and everything, and man, it made a lot of the game tremendously more atmospheric and awesome looking. I really enjoyed what the overdrive ray tracing mode did to the look and experience and feel of this game. Anyway, after finding the 720p Ultra FSR settings that worked to hit and exceed 30 FPS, so I could cap it at 30 for a nice stable experience for the most part, and yes, I do consider this playable. I mean, hell, it's what the consoles were stuck at, wasn't it? That said, it's only playable, in my opinion, for specific types of gameplay styles and specific character builds. I would not want to play a runner-gunner or a sniper or something at 30 FPS and at these kind of resolutions, especially not with thumbsticks. But for builds like a netrunner, for a smart gunner, or even a brawler, yeah, this can totally work. But hey, how much overhead do we have here? Do I have enough in the tank to push up to 1080p to get a cleaner look? The answer is, yeah, pretty close anyway. We still need FSR in Ultra mode, and I did need to turn off one of the ray tracing options, the ray traced local shadows. But yeah, I can get excruciatingly close to 30 FPS at 1080p. If I was prepared to turn a few more things down or off, we could totally get a decent 30 FPS lock here, but frankly, if you are turning off so much other stuff just to get ray tracing to work, well, there's a point of diminishing returns, isn't there? And frankly, I think we're here right now. And just for some context, here's what that same walkthrough looks at 1080p with and without ray tracing, but the without ray tracing example, we can hump FSR up to the much more pleasant performance mode, meaning a 720p internal render scaling to 1080p versus the 360p internal render on the 1080p Ultra FSR settings for the ray tracing one. Ray tracing is a cool novelty here. It's a nice gimmick. It's a fun thing to show off. But honestly, on the Ally, I would just rather play without it for better clarity. We can have ray tracing at 720p, we can lock to 30, and I can call that playable, but it is not my preference for playable. Especially in a game like this where, visual detail is going to matter a lot of the time. There doesn't seem a lot of point to having extremely realistic lighting when the entire game is a, well, kind of fuzzy mess like I've forgotten my glasses or something. But even if your regular gameplay is in normal mode on this thing, you can still use ray tracing for cool-ass screenshots. That's still a thing that's totally practical here. But there you go. Hopefully you found this as interesting as I did, and if you did, hopefully you've done the thumb and the comment and the blah blah blah. So yeah, Blunty's continuing adventures in being surprised by how much he can squeeze out of the ROG Ally. Seriously, as shocked as I was I can get ray tracing working in Minecraft, this kind of blew my mind for a while. It's incredible, right? Thank you very much for watching. Thank you as always to the patrons scrolling up above there. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.